Welcome to Surrender School. This is the 2023 homework group.
Let's go ahead and start with a set-aside prayer, if we could, please. Set-aside prayer. God, please set aside everything I think I know about myself, my emotional sobriety, the 12 steps, and you, for an open mind and a new experience of myself, my emotional sobriety, the 12 steps, and especially you. Amen. All right. So we are going to get started. So this week our homework was kind of a lot. I mean, it was a lot of work. It was like 10, 11 pages, felt like, and a lot of extra reading, it felt like, but it was okay. We're going to be talking about the step 4, and we're talking about resentments today. And if you'll notice, if you received the homework that I sent out to the WhatsApp group, I went ahead and completed a resentment form. That's actually due next week. So us having it ahead of time, at least we'll know how to do it, okay? I completed a small portion of what mine is. So let's start with step 4. Step 4 made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. In step 4, Lori says, he said he'll start the step 4 in the Big Book way. It's really simple. It's very fast, much simpler and faster than any of the step 4s that was used in some of the 12-step programs. And he said in the speech that he gave, he says, this is only the beginning. So step 4 is making a list and writing out our information. So we're going to get to see what that looks like. And if you'll notice right here on the screen, if you've received this is actually a link. If you click this, how it works, you will see the information that was optional reading there. All right, for step 4 here, it starts on page 25 of our homework, the Big Book study group. Could someone please volunteer to read the part in the yellow? You can just unmute. If you can, unmute.
In step 3, we made a decision to place our, hang on, I gotta make it bigger. Our will and our lives into the care. I guess am I missing something?
I don't know. Can everybody else?
I can take it from here, Kay.
Okay,
our will
thanks,
and our lives our will and our lives into the care of our higher power. What we have to do now is to be rid of those things in ourselves which have been blocking us from our higher power. When we get rid of the things that block us from our higher power, we will find that our higher power enters into our lives. The task at hand is to get rid of the blocks. Step 4 begins this process of unblocking.
Ooh, that's going to be great. All right, and this is taken from, if you'll remember, this actually points to page 63 in AA's Big Book. And in AA's Big Book, this is right after they talked about the 3rd step prayer. Would someone please read this part in yellow?
I can read. Again, this is Kay. We thought well before taking the step, making sure we were ready, that we could at last abandon ourselves utterly to him. We found it very desirable to take this spiritual step with an understanding person, such as our wife, best friend, or spiritual advisor. But it is better to meet God alone than with one who might misunderstand. The wording was, of course, quite optional, so long as we expressed the idea, voicing it without reservation. This was only a beginning, though if honestly and humbly made, an effect, sometimes a very great one, was felt at once.
Yeah, the first time I took a 4th step, I made the mistake of taking it with someone that I didn't know very well. It wasn't a trusted advisor, and my information was leaked. I mean, by that point, it didn't really matter at that point. But so one of the strongest encouragements that I can give anybody who's taken this fourth step is to make sure that you are taking the step with someone that you trust, because some of this stuff can be quite emotional and quite very close to our hearts. But someone continue to read the next slide. It's the end of page 63 at the beginning of 64.
I'll read it, Susan.
Thank you, Susan.
Next, we launched out on a course of vigorous action, the first step of which is a personal house cleaning, which many of us have never attempted. Though our decision was vital and crucial step, it could have been a permit in effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and to be rid of the things in ourselves which had been blocking us. Our liquor was but a symptom, so we had to get down to causes and conditions.
Ooh, and as we go on, we're going to see the cause and conditions of the reasons that many of us use our drug of choice or alcoholic foods, if you will, to numb out. So going on to the next one. The big book does compare the personal inventory with a business inventory. And if you'll remember that story in the big book that on page, I think it's on page 64-ish, at the top of page 64, when he's talking about a business wouldn't stay in business very long if they didn't do inventory and took inventory of what they had before they tried to start adding more in. And same thing with us as compulsive overeaters, food addicts. So would somebody please continue on with page 64, the reading in the yellow on the right side of the page?
I can read it.
Thank you, Kim.
Therefore, we started upon a personal inventory. This was step 4. A business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. Taking a commercial inventory is a fact-finding and a fact-facing process. It is an effort to discover the truth about the stock in trade. One object is to disclose damaged or unusable goods, to get rid of them promptly and without regret. If the owner of the business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values. We did exactly the same thing with our lives. We took stock honestly. First, we searched out the flaws in our makeup which caused our failure, being convinced that self, manifested in various ways, was what had defeated us. We considered its common manifestations.
Thank you for reading. Moving on to the next page here. Okay, so on page 25 of our homework, it says, Lori says that there are 3 aspects of self that we're going to be looking at. We're going to be looking at resentments, we're going to be looking at fear, and we're going to be looking at sex conduct. And what I wanted to say is today, I think we're going to be talking about resentment. And for the next 2 weeks, we'll be talking next week, we'll talk about fear. And the week after is the sex conduct, if I'm not mistaken, on the homework. And right here as well, I will say that next week homework is just 2 pages, just 2 pages of reading. So it's not going to be a lot to do, but they are asking us to complete the resentment form. So these next couple of slides, or these next few slides, will show us how to complete that resentment form. And I will put it in the chat here in a few minutes, the link to it. So in case you haven't seen it yet, you're going to be seeing in the next couple of slides. And speaking of which, would someone please read what's in the yellow at the bottom right part of the screen?
I can read again. So the big book's ordering of step 4 is basically dealing with the past, dealing with the future, and learning how to live in the present with other people.
And that is taken from Lori on page 25 of our homework there. So in case you're looking for that information, so we are dealing with our past, we're dealing with our future, and we're learning to live in the present. And I don't know about you guys, I don't do a lot of living in the present. It's either in the past or I'm future tripping big time. So just learning to live in the present for me is going to be something completely new. All right. And on page 64 and 65 of AA's big book, they start to talk about resentment. Would someone please take a look at page, if you can't see the screen very well, if you have your AA big book, and at the bottom of 65, it starts with resentment is the number 1 and ends at the top of page 65. Would someone please read that?
I will. Resentment is the number 1 offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. From it stem all forms of spiritual disease, for we have been not only mentally and physically ill, we have been spiritually sick. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. In dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. We listed people, institutions, or principles with whom we were angry. We asked ourselves why we were angry. In most cases, it was found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, our personal relationships, including sex, were hurt or threatened. So we were sore, we were burned up.
Thank you. And if you'll remember that part about, hang on a second, let me get my lights to come back on. In a minute, I guess they will. All right. In a moment, you're going to see that we're going to be talking about people, institutions, and principles. And if you've received the PDF file that I sent in the homework on there, I was trying to break it down. This is our homework though, so I would love some input on if I didn't break it down, if I'm not doing it correctly, or if you guys have a better way of doing it, I'd love to hear it. So moving on to the next screen, we're going to start with step 4, resentment. Would someone please read the yellow?
I can.
Thank you, Susanna.
What is a resentment? It's something on our minds that we resent. Now, resentment is broader than anger. It includes anger, but it goes much farther. Its Latin roots mean to feel over and over, and it's best described as anything that's living rent-free in your mind. Things that you regret, things that anger you or that frustrate you, things that you wish had happened or hadn't happened. The what-ifs of if-onlys of our lives.
Oh boy, the what ifs and if onlys. Boy, do I live in that one over and over again. And you'll see some examples in a few moments. And the people or the people, principles, and institutions that live rent-free in my head that I gave the examples of, there's a real examples for me. My ex-boyfriend, the county that I live in, and for the reasons you'll see in a few moments. And then as far as the principle is, my principle is I'm fat and I'm ugly and I'm unlovable. So those things live rent-free in my head. These are things I live over and over and over again. And sometimes it's been reinforced by something that's happened to me, and sometimes it is just my negative thinking. So yeah. So moving on to the next slide. Would somebody please volunteer to read? This is on page 26 of our study guide. Would someone please read those 2 paragraphs? Yes,
I can read.
Thank you, Kay.
You can consider a resentment as something or somebody that you're angry at because it occupies your mind. In a sense, then you're angry at people to whom you've done wrongs because your guilt continues to occupy your mind. That sense of resentment allows you to broaden the concept of anger beyond the dictionary definition. In one way or another, a resentment then is that what happened in the past just didn't go your way. It's what we discovered in step 3, that we want to be in charge and that life hasn't gone our way.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We're going to have some questions that are coming up very soon in the next couple of slides that I really want to hear what you guys did for homework, because for me, these are the things that were just jumping off the page at me. And in this particular one, it is the sentence that says, in a sense, then you're angry at people who you've done wrong because you feel guilt about it. And that is definitely me. And that's what the county, you're going to see in a couple of slides here, that's what the county was. I did it to myself. I did it to them. They didn't want their money. They didn't want my money. They wanted their money. So yeah, I was angry because I had to give up my money and got some embarrassment in the process of doing so. So moving on to the next slide. And this is page 26 also. Would someone volunteer to read this small paragraph?
I can read it.
Thank you.
The first introduction the Big Book gives is to list people, institution, or principles with whom we were angry, page 64. It is true that the Big Book uses the word angry. I can only suggest that listing people, institutions, or principles that you resent or that you are angry at because they occupy your mind is very, very helpful.
Thank you for reading. Okay. And then also he goes on to say what it looks like, what principles are, because it's not really defined in the Big Book. Principles really aren't defined in the Big Book because I looked. I think they're defined in 12 and 12, but I have not seen them defined in the Big Book. But the principles, he gives examples of what principles are versus what people are versus what institutions are. Would someone be so kind as to read this slide?
This is Claudia. I'll read.
Thank you, Claudia.
You're welcome. Okay, so principles, however, are not defined in the Big Book and are not easy to define. I find that it's very helpful to consider principles as meaning ideas that seem to be true that bother me. Here are some examples. I'll never get thin. There will always be terrible suffering in this world. I can never eat French fries again. Life sucks and then you die. People ignore me. I'll never amount to anything. This program will never work. I'm fat and ugly and unlovable. No one understands my pain. Don't put yourself down, but do put down principles about yourself that bother you. That will give you true insight into issues relating to you.
Thank you so much, Claudia. Okay, so now we start the very first part of the form, the resentment form. And by the way, this is what we'll be talking about next week, the actual form itself and filling out. So I will be asking for people, if you know of anything that's a people, principle, or an institution that you want to put on your form, feel free to do so. But this is what I did. So in this, there's the yellow highlights, except for the one in the upper right part of the screen that's in the example box. I would love it if someone would read the instructions of the very first column, and also the one in the green box that says fill out a resentment form. Can somebody please read those short statements?
I can.
Thank you, Susanna.
Study from the bottom of page 63 to the end of page 65, and then follow its instructions. List all people, institutions, and principles, column 1, from top to bottom. Filling out the resentment form, column 1. The first instruction is simple to make a list.
And as you can see, the example that I gave, I only gave 3 examples, but Lord knows my list was long. It was terribly long. It was like 12 things on it, but I only put 3 on here because the first one is people, the second one is institution, and the third one is principles. The first one being my ex-boyfriend. And I didn't put his name just in case somebody knew. I didn't want to break his anonymity, although I should probably protect you from him. And then the second one is the county. That is considered an institution. And a principle is I'm fat, ugly, and lovable. And when I read that, when Lori wrote that on page, I think it was page 26 on the previous slide, I identified with that very, very, very strongly. And I knew that that was one of the things that I was resentful about. So this is the first column. So if you can look at if you're looking at your homework, if you want to jot down 2 or 3 things that maybe the next one will help you. And by the way, I had to call my sponsor to get help with that 4th column, but this was a very nice homework assignment for me. All right, so the next column is at the top. If somebody could read just the top of the page on the left side, and where it says column 2, the things that are in the yellow. Would someone volunteer to read that for me?
I can read.
Thank you.
Column 2. The second instruction is to ask why we were angry or what our injuries were, page 65. Short and to the point description of the various things that put these people or these institutions or these principles in our minds. We need to write only enough so that we know what we are talking about. We're not filling out the second column for anyone but ourselves.
Okay, I know we're not supposed to do it for anybody but ourselves, but I did it for her. I showed you what was on mine. Remember, the first one was my ex-boyfriend. So that one right there is the causes. He cheated, he gaslit, he lied frequently. He broke my heart, which I need to change that. I put that twice. And then the next one was the county, because they garnished my wages. They jeopardized my ability to pay my other bills. They didn't do that. I did that. And then they embarrassed me in front of HR. Oh my God, all my fault. However, I wanted to blame them. And then the third one was I'm ugly, I'm fat, and I'm unlovable. And so the cause is I hate myself. I can't accept myself as I am. And the cause also is I dress to hide my body. I never really show off my curves. At the top of the page, it says in column B, or the column 2, list all causes, and then from top to bottom. This is a simple thing. What are the causes of the things that you listed in column 1? So this is what I came up with. And in the next coming screens, I hope that you'll have something written down that you don't mind sharing, if it's not too personal for you. So then the next column is the effects it had. And if you'll notice on the left side, there are a whole bunch of green check marks, and how it affected me. And if you'll see at the top of the page, it says do all 6 instincts, and that's that column with the check marks, and column 3 from top to bottom of each cause. So would someone volunteer to please read column 3, what Lori said on page 30?
I will.
Please.
The third instruction is to ask ourselves, was it our self-esteem, our security, our ambitions, our personal or sex relations, which had been interfered with? You'll note at the bottom of page 64, a similar set of categories, but with pocketbooks, wallets, or purses instead of security. Self-esteem means how I feel about myself. Security means how safe I feel, including financially safe. Ambitions means what I want out of life. Personal relations, sex relations, and fear are obvious. So for each one of the causes, column 2, we put check marks where each one of the subcategories has been affected.
Yeah. Okay. So remember that first one for me is my ex-boyfriend. The next one was how it affected from the county, how it affected me. And then the bottom one, the checklist, was for I'm fat, I'm ugly, and I'm unlovable. So you can see those checks that are there. And in the coming screens, you're going to see what it looks like all put together. There is one more section that's really not talked about that much, but we're going to go on to that next section. Can I get a volunteer to read the upper right part in yellow?
I will do that. It's Patsy.
Please.
So we look at these people, column 1, their symptoms, column 2, and the way these disturbed us, column 3. We find that these people were sick too, and were given a prayer to say. We ask God to help us show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience that we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. There's the prayer. God, please help me show blank the same tolerance, pity, and patience that I would cheerfully grant a sick friend.
Thank you so much, Patsy. And then it says, consider the first 3 columns carefully. When I worked this the first time with my sponsor, for everything or person or institution I had on the list, I had to say this prayer for them. This, God, please help me show ex-boyfriend the same tolerance, pity, and patience that I would cheerfully grant a sick friend. Because I know some of the things that he did would be considered very, very sick. But I the first time I saw this column, the first time I saw this form, I completely missed that little column that's there. So I wanted to call it out because it really is an important step to start to heal for me. I don't know what's going to happen this time because I have some people and some institutions on my list, my new list, that I don't know. I may have to pray the resentment prayer first before I can get past it. So moving on to the next column, in the final column. Would someone please read the essential fourth column?
This is Christy. I can do that.
Thank you, Christy.
The essential fourth column. Let's remember that the purpose of step 4 is to identify those parts of ourselves which are blocking us from our higher power. We have decided in step 3 to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understand God. That decision means that we have to discover what defects of character block us from our higher power. The fourth column of the resentment form is in fact our analysis of those characters, or of those defects of character.
Thank you, Christy. All right. So the question that usually I've heard, I know that my sponsor many times have asked me, or sponsors, because I've had many, at the end of the day, ask yourself, where were you selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, or frightened? Because those often lead to show my character defects. So in the next couple of slides, you will see how this actually comes together. So I'll move on to the next slide. But before I do, this is our question slide. If you'll notice on page 31 of the Big Book Study Guide that Lori wrote, he asked a few questions. So I'm going to just pause here after we've seen what we've just done and ask the question, what's on your mind that's bugging you? Because if you'll remember in the homework, in that column 1, we list the things that are bugging us, things that are living rent-free in our head. I'd be interested to hear, does anybody have anything that they want to comment? You feel free to raise your hand or just unmute yourself and let me know. Yes, ma'am, please, Joy.
I am very resentful. There's 2 things that are bothering me right now. One is a person that I constantly see bully others. And it, one time it was me, but it's others. That's bothering me. And I will tell you the other thing that I'm very bothered by even more, and it keeps coming up every day. I am so bothered that I have to be abstinent right now, that I can't go to the food. I'm pissed off. I'm angry that I can't use food anymore, if I want to live. So yeah, I'm just really mad at that. So, and others around me can and do.
Oh, wow. And any of these questions, feel free to ask, are the reasons that these things are bothering you, affecting much of your life? With the analogy that, or the example that was just given to us, my question would be, is affecting your life? I mean, is it affecting your life? Does it affect how you feel about yourself, or how safe you feel, or how frustrated you feel, how good or bad the relationship is? Can you see that these things are blocking you from somewhat of the spirit? So feel free to answer any of these questions, anybody.
I'll continue.
Please.
I'm sorry. I'm telling on Cher. She just wrote me. She asked me if she was a bully that I was talking about. No, she's not.
Okay.
But anyway, no, they do. Here's why they do. I know when I'm disturbed that the problem is me. So, and then I will tell you that then I can turn on myself and have a resentment against myself, because obviously I'm not doing something right if I'm bothered by these things, right? I'm learning to know that that's just part of being human. But they do, I feel unsafe around the bully person. I don't feel safe around there. And I'm not even safe because I'm learning how to honor my own feelings. I'm afraid I'm gonna say something or do something that's not healthy for me or him. Yeah, and then about the food, I actually have to say that it's almost empowering me now, because it's an acceptance. When I resent this fact, it means that I'm accepting it. So in a way that's powerful, and it makes me willing to do what I need to do. And I never had that willingness before. And I feel like it's letting God help me. So, and it just says how full of fear you are. Both of these things cause me fear. Fear of the bullies, that's obvious, but fear that I can't keep doing this. I've been doing it now, I don't know, about 17 days with the food, and I have fear. I can't keep doing this, and I need to for my health. So grateful that God is gracing me, because before, when I needed to, I didn't, but I am now. So thanks.
Thank you so much. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to add? Or have you looked at your list and maybe want to share?
So
Oh,
Claudia has her hand up.
thank you. It's on the other screen, by the way, guys. I'm so sorry. Claudia, would you please feel free? Go ahead.
There's two Claudias. Is it A or L you're referring
Claudia
to?
A.
All right, that's me. All right. So
Thank
that's
you.
a resentment gone away. So I am, one of the things I'm really struggling with right now is I was in a car accident September 6th, and there's a lot of like, woe's me, because it was a 6-month-old car that I replaced after having my previous car for 19 years. And the situation was that, the other driver was found at fault. But I just can't, I'm still having trouble like thinking about it without being enraged about the situation. And also, she's taken some of my comfort in driving now. And every time I'm driving, I feel a little bit afraid of the other foot's gonna drop. So I don't know. I have an outside help now at this point. I think I need that, but I'm just saying it out loud because I think sometimes you need to. So thanks for listening.
Thank you, Claudia. Excellent. Claudia L in Florida. Hello, Claudia.
Hello, everybody. So my thing is I've worked several step fours because I've done different workshops, and thank God I've been able to release those things. But there's one thing that keeps coming back, and it's not constant, but it has to do with my daughter, but it's me. I'm feeling, and I'm a good mom. I am. I can recognize that. But I've done some things, I grew up, my dad was very strict, like extremely strict. So I think I carried that over into the way I parented my kids, like just high expectations in school and high expectations with everything. And I know that all kids are different because I have a daughter and I have a son, and they're both very, very different. But she's very sensitive, and I think the way I handled certain things, and I could probably count them in one hand, but they really hurt her a lot. And I feel like that carried over, and I've already talked to her about it, and I've made amends. And, she's like, okay, mom, and we've worked it out, but it still comes back once in a while. And I'm not sure if that's something I put in the resentment. As we were going through the homework though, I realized, I'm like, Claudia, well, you recognize that you're a good mom. Can you not trust God that whatever you did in the past, he's gonna, I still get like she deals with a lot of anxiety. She has a lot of anxiety. And I have to trust that he's gonna be able to fix it. Because if I could go back, I would do it different, but you can't do that. So I'm wondering if maybe there's still something I need to put in writing that'll help me to really set that down.
Thank you so much, Claudia. Oh,
Thank
thank you
you.
so much for sharing from the heart. That's beautiful. Christy, would you mind sharing?
Yeah, mine feels very superficial. It's the type of thing that I'll write down. And then a year from now, I'll go really, Christy, that was bothering you? But it did. This week I had a little thing that my daughter-in-law and son moved in about 6 months ago. And I've noticed that when she does the dishes and all, the water is just kind of everywhere and it's left there. And we have laminate countertops that were replaced a couple years ago, and water will cause the laminate to swell. And we're about to sell our house. We want to go on the market in a few months. And so, thinking from that lens, it was just, when I look at the second bullet point here, how does it make me feel about myself, or how frustrated I feel and my relationships? I mean, it affects my sense of security, because monetarily, even because I feel like, a possible buyer would look at it and feel like oh, this is something we need to replace. It affects my relationship with her, because I've expressed that, this can be wiped up, just dried before we walk away. And it was never an argument or anything. It was just, hey, would you mind wiping it up when you're done? And so the fact that it has been there afterwards just bothered me still, which affects my relationship with her. And so actually, I sat with it for like a week and then decided that I'm not powerless in this situation. I can take a white towel and put it where the caulking is loose, because really that's the problem, is I need to recaulk. And I haven't done it. And I put a beautiful white dish that can catch the water. And I found gratitude in the fact that, you know what, she's doing the dishes and she's saving me time to dedicate to my program and to my family by doing that. So it was definitely blocking me from the sunlight of the spirit. And I love this little slide. I'm going to take a picture of this, and
I'll send this to you. I'll send it
thank
to
you. That would be great.
Yeah. I'll send the whole thing to you, as a matter of fact. If you give me a few moments and check the chat, it'll be there, okay? Thank you, Claudia, for sharing. Well, thank you all for sharing, actually. Christy, Claudia, Phil, I'm going to go ahead and go on to the next slide, because we're down to about 10-15 minutes here. So we're going to go through it. Remember how I said that we're going to see what it looks like all put together. And this is all put together now. So, okay, remember people, causes, and effects. Remember people, principles, and people, institutions, and principles. So this is what it looks like all put together. So the resentment is the ex-boyfriend, cheated, gaslight, lied, broke my heart. And these are the areas in which it affected me, my self-esteem. And each one of these things, I had to put a check mark on how it affected me. And then over here in the core character defects, because in a few moments, we're going to have to fold those center ones and see how this affected us. And the selfishness, in the end, it looks like it's on me. I wanted him to be somebody he just was not going to ever be. He showed me exactly who he was at the beginning, and I just didn't believe him. I just didn't. My dishonesty was, I was lying to myself about someone that he could never be. Like I said, if you showed me who he was at the beginning, I was like, oh, but I can change it. So that's on me. That's on me. Self-seeking. Where was I self-seeking? I tried many actions. Most of it is guilting him into being something I wanted him to be. And I tried to change my core beliefs to please him, or to become something that I wasn't. I do that often with friendships. I do that often with relationships as well. Where was I frightened? I did not want to grow old alone, and that was where I was frightened. And at the bottom, it shows the cause and effect. The cause, he cheated. The effect was, what's wrong with me? I'm not good enough. The cause at the bottom, gaslighting. Did I really see or feel or hear that? What I think I saw, felt, or, did I really hear it? maybe I didn't hear it because man, he was could give a master class in gaslighting. And then lying. Maybe I am going crazy. Maybe I didn't really, maybe that didn't happen. And then when my heart was broken, I'll never find anyone to love or to love me. And then ultimately what happens after that breakup, I went back to using food to help me heal, or what can I buy to make myself feel better? And there was not enough food on this earth that was going to make me feel better. I just had to walk through it. So, and as far as institutions are concerned, the causes and effect. On the left side, you see the county is the institution. And then the county garnished my wages. And I thought, oh, they jeopardized my ability to pay my bills. No, I jeopardized my ability to pay my bills because I didn't pay them. I had the money in the bank. The money wasn't the problem. I just didn't do it. And I was also embarrassed in front of HR. And over here on the right side, you see where all of the check marks in the center are, how it affected my self-esteem, my pocketbook, my ambition. None of these things affected my sex life, of course. And then how was fear involved? And yes, to all of this, there was. And then the selfishness that I felt on this one was I wanted to engage. I wanted so bad. I wanted more to engage in my addiction than I did in paying my bills. Because the truth of the matter, I didn't pay those bills because I was too busy out there in my shopping addiction, buying high-end this, that, and the third, not paying attention to my bills, the dishonesty, telling myself that it didn't really matter, that, oh, it'll be okay. I'll get it next paycheck, or, next week I'll pay it next week, or, I'll just pay it in a few minutes. And that dishonesty just kept going. Self-seeking. I saw comfort in my addiction over the responsibility of paying food. Basically, adulting. I chose not to adult. I chose to participate in eating and shopping and doing all the things that I was doing in the streets, and not participating in being an adult. And how was I frightened? Being seen less than, because that busybody in HR was going to tell everybody now that, Karen's not out here paying her bills. So yeah, that was the cause and effect. So the cause, garnished wages. Why can't I be a normal adult? Jeopardizing my other bills. Will I be able to pay my car payment this month? What will this do to my credit rating? Embarrassment. Oh crap, that busybody in HR is going to tell everybody and make me look bad. So those are the causes and effect of that. And then lastly, the principles. I'm fat, I'm ugly, and I'm unlovable. I hate myself. I can't accept myself as I am. I dress to hide my body. And you saw it affect every aspect of my life. These things, or all 5 of these effects, were affected in some way, at some level. And where was I selfish in these aspects? Expectation of perfection and self-rejection. Dishonest. Where was I dishonest? My appearance does not make me unlovable. I had to hear that from my sponsor. That was not a core belief for me. And self-seeking. Where was I self-seeking? I tried to appear smaller by dressing to be invisible. I still do that in lots of ways. We're all Black most of the time. Most of the time you see me, you're going to see me in Black. Because somebody told me once that makes you look slimming. Never wear stripes going this way because that makes you look fat, or, whatever the case was. Even at a size 4, I was doing some of these exact same things. So it wasn't the size. I was dressing to be invisible. And then lastly, where was I frightened? Where was that fear? The fear is that it might be true. Maybe I am fat and ugly and unlovable, but I will never be able to have a perfect body, never be lovable. So yeah, those are the items that I had on those. And then lastly, over here, could someone please volunteer? Oh, I meant these slides got mixed up, but as you can see, these are just the instructions. It talked about taking those 2 slides and folding them in, and then looking at compared to the 4th column and the 1st column only. If someone could read the part that's in yellow, I greatly appreciate it. Dolores?
Yeah. Putting out of our minds the wrongs others have done. use fold lines to cover columns 2 and 3. We resolutely looked for our own mistakes. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened? Disregard the other person involved entirely. Disregard the other person entirely. Where were we to blame? When we saw our faults, we listed them. We placed them before us in black and white. We admitted our wrongs honestly and were willing to set these matters straight. Page 67.
Thank you so much, Dolores. And as you can see, when you fold those columns in and you look at what my resentment is, and I look at my part in it, where was I selfish? Where was I dishonest? Where was I self-seeking? And where was I frightened? It becomes a lot easier to see what my fault, where, how that relationship had to fail. Because I really wanted him to be somebody he wasn't. And what my fault was in that whole county debacle, what my fault is in my thinking I'm fat, ugly, and unlovable. So this is what it's going to look like in the end. And next week, they'll be going over this one. And this is a part of the homework for next week. And I hope that someone else would want to share. But I will have those slides again next week. All right. In the last slide here, we have the questions that are at the last of, I think it's on page 36, and I forgot to put at the bottom of the page there. It says, are you spiritually sick, and how? Are you able to look at people who have harmed you as spiritually sick? In what way? And then number 3 there, it says, if you're trying, page 552, we'll have somebody read that in just a moment. Exactly what do you want out of your life? What would you like for yourself? Would someone please volunteer to read from page 552, the resentment?
I can read. Oh.
Hey, Kim, iPad Air 2, would you please go ahead and read?
If you have a resentment you want to be free of, if you will pray for the person or the thing that you resent, you will be free. If you will ask in prayer for everything you want for yourself to be given to them, you will be free. Ask for their health, their prosperity, their happiness, and you will be free. Even when you don't really want it for them and your prayers are only words and you don't mean it, go ahead and do it anyway. Do it every day for 2 weeks, and you will find you have come to mean it and you want it for them. And you will realize that wherever you used to feel bitterness and resentment and hatred, you will now feel compassionate, understanding, and love.
Thank you, Kim. And then the next question goes on to, do those people who have harmed you have anything like what you want to have for yourself? And then the next question is, do you see yourself dishonest? Do you see your selfishness, dishonesty, self-seeking, and fear? What patterns do you see in your relationships with others in that regard? And final question is, do you see how these 4 character defects are blocking you off from the sunlight of the spirit? And the only example that I have for this is when my ex broke my heart the way that he did. My sponsor at the time recommended me doing this prayer for 2 weeks. And I can tell you, it didn't work at first. It took about 3 months, 3 full months of me praying this almost every day because I really wanted relief. And before I knew it, I actually did mean it. Now, that doesn't mean that later down the road, I didn't go back to thinking like this because, I am so flawed. But I have to tell you, it took me almost 3 months to get relief from feeling this way. And with that is the last thing that we have on the list. I'm going to leave these questions on the screen. And I think that, I don't know what time it is because I can't see the clock, but we have a few minutes before we have to close out. Does anybody have anything that they'd like to add to this, or have any comments that you'd like to make? Joe?
Hi. You know the prayer that we just did where it adds in a bit about praying for their happiness and everything. Does that need to be incorporated into the prayer on the form? Because I noticed, I don't know if it was just because of space, that part wasn't squeezed in. Yeah, just like it's a longer version of the sick man's prayer. To pray for them as well. But I didn't, on that form that we just looked at, it didn't include praying for their happiness. I didn't know what thoughts you had about that.
Oh, the thoughts I had. Oh, let me go back to that form where you're talking about. I know which one you're talking about. Right here, right? Correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So the prayer on that one is, God, please help me show blank the same tolerance, pity, and patience that I could cheerfully grant a sick person. Now, this was a part of the steps that was originally written in the first 164 pages of the big book, if I'm not mistaken. Well, actually it is. However, in the back of the book, page 552 is a part of a story that one of the members of AA was telling, and what he did and what his sponsor proposed was he pray a full prayer, a different type of prayer. He prayed this prayer as a result of his resentment towards his wife, if I'm not mistaken. The story is, if I remember the correct story, he had some serious resentments against his wife, and before long, he, through praying this prayer, that was lifted. But I don't think that they're the same. But does anybody else have any concerns or thoughts on that?
I think it was only because like I've been given one that was like a bit of a mixture in the past, so I just didn't know if there were two separate prayers. So I think you've explained they're kind of separate. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, but I don't think the words. I don't think the words matter as much as the action. And Lori says that several times when he's talking about the prayers. It doesn't matter if you get them right. It's a matter of taking the action of praying for somebody else rather than praying for yourself in this particular situation. At least that's how I felt. Does anybody have anything before we close out with the Serenity Prayer? All right, if you guys will all unmute, if you would, and let's close out with the Serenity Prayer. After a moment of silence.
See you next week.